so much knowledge that would be really helpful in that. But
Yeah.
the whole point, like, I kind of want to go back to, you know, when Michael was alive and we were talking about, you know, getting people engaged.
Yeah.
Like, I find my thoughts going back to that because, you know, I'm in different groups as well where I see different dynamics.
Right.
And I think that people, some people that I know would actually enjoy doing that. And I think that we don't think enough about what's actually fun. I know for me, I'm recognizing that I've been conditioned to think that fun is frivolous.
No, that's not true.
I
Learning
know.
is fun. The Science Museum's slogan is "Where learning is fun." That was their advertising slogan.
But I find a lot of contradiction in what we say, and I'm saying we at different levels at different times, and what we do. Like, even when Sam was sharing the story about how he usually doesn't do something because he's too busy. But if we valued fun just as much as we valued everything else, you wouldn't draw that conclusion.
Right.
So it shows something that's happening under the surface. And I know I've felt it.
Yeah. 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 There is a very slow movement to secularize the kind of guidance that traditionally came out of theology, because it's existential thinking. It's sort of best practices, but kind of coming down, you know, from a high priest,
well,
or a shaman, as opposed to from the ground up by analytical reasoning and model-based reasoning. But I think, you know, in the 21st century, I think humankind is ready to secularize existential thinking, and not have to make it faith-based, but make it reasoning and model-based.
So there's two important distinctions that I want to call out. One is that there's so much guilt involved with the first way of doing things. And that whole idea of coming down, in a way, we're still replicating that pattern by telling people what would be good instead of by asking people, what do you think would be good?
Right. Yeah. See, when I was a teenager, Sam, did you want to say something?
Yes. A little pop out meta. Can we lay some topics on the table and then see if we want to discuss? The first topic I'm hearing is this idea of fun versus seriousness. I also came with some notes because last week we said we were going to discuss the behavior spreadsheet and see if we wanted to come up with ones that we generally agreed upon and sort of build up a kind of a practices model or a rules of engagement. But that is a meta comment. I will take the fun versus seriousness as a topic on the table. And just quickly, in 3 seconds, thumbs up, thumbs down on the behavior experiment idea, since that was raised last week. One.
I don't know what you mean by the behavior experiment idea.
So there was a spreadsheet that we put together probably 4 years ago that said, I will think before I speak. There's about 90 such suggestions. I'm not going to interrupt people. I'm going to stay calm. I'm not going to stay triggered, blah, 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 blah. So there's about 93 whatever such suggestions, and everyone has a column in that spreadsheet. You, in fact, have a column. Barry has a column where you provided your responses. Yes, I'll do this. No, I don't think I'll do this, or a few comments on it. So since there are 90 plus, I thought it would be good to start making some forward progress on how we want to conduct ourselves. So that was what I would call the behavior experiment.
Yeah.
Barry, do you want to talk first?
Oh, yeah, I was going to say that one of the most fascinating seminars that I attended when I was a teenager was actually led by the local rabbi in the synagogue. It was after school. We had to go from the public school to the synagogue, and about a dozen of us attended. And it was about exactly what you're talking about, ethical reasoning. Every week, he would throw out a synthetic ethical conundrum. And we would sit around the table, you know, the dozen or so of us, and reason our way through what we thought would be the best practices for handling these ethical conundrums. And I loved it. And back in the 90s, when I was running Micromuse, and we had a public channel on Micromuse, I reprised that whole thing. I would throw out ethical conundrums and let the kids on Micromuse reason their way through them. And some of them I recorded the transcripts, so you can actually see some of them. Not all of them, but just a few. And the kids love that. They love the reasoning through these ethical conundrums.
Yeah, so and those are the kind of conversations that I'm really interested in having. So like Sam, so to answer your question, like I'm willing to like do your behavior experiment and do this and do that. But I also, and it doesn't have to be here, it's probably not going to be here. I want to have the conversations about how I feel about doing that. Because to be honest, I feel like I've been coming here for years thinking that this had something to do with collaboration, and it does, but it really has to do with your collaboration work. And I'm happy to support that. However, I'm also starting to recognize that I may not find support with what I want to do unless I take the lead and move it somewhere else. So the end of yesterday's conversation, the call, when we started thinking about what the nature of humanity really was, I want to have those conversations because I feel strongly that we can't solve the problems if we're asking the wrong questions.
Yep.
And again, I'm happy to do what you think is necessary, like filling out these forms. But I'm feeling I'm not getting enough of what I need. And I think that's why you don't find women, and I'm not singling you out, Sam, but that's why we don't have women in GCC. When I came in, we had a lot of women in GCC.
Yeah.
And I don't know, I don't mean to speak for other people. I can only speak for myself. And I know somebody watching, I don't come across as looking so nice, but it's important to be honest. I don't feel like my needs get met. I don't know if other people feel their needs are getting met. But
Emotions, needs, and requests. Lay them out in one or two words for each category. Emotions, needs, and requests.
But now part of my needs are like, I do like connecting and I do like helping and being of assistance. So that's good. But I want to take it a step further and have some conversations. I had always hoped that maybe a call would be divided into pieces.
Breakout rooms.
Well,
No, not
no,
even-
that's the idea behind, let's take some specific topics and say, let's spend part of the session on this topic, part of the session on that topic. That was an attempt to find a little bit of focus.
Well,
And I
that's
think
one
that
way.
That's one way, yes. And my request to put topics on the table is to solicit ideas on what people want to talk about. So
Right.
this is another one I put down, needs not being met. What is humanity? Both of those are now on my list.
Okay, so another way to look at it, which is how I usually look at it, is I think of like, let's say a variety show on TV. There's the monologue part. There's maybe a little dialogue with the audience, and then it's guests. So for me, I'd like to see like the check-in stuff. To me, that I have a lot to say about that. I won't, I could take it or leave it. To me, a check-in should be if there's something that you need to say that will explain how you're showing up today, then it's important. Otherwise, if I want to know what somebody ate for dinner, I could look at the pictures they put on Facebook. I don't really care. So what I'm saying is, as a teacher, when you go into the room, you have you have like a starting question up on the board for people to think about. I do like the idea of having some sort of connecting time. Like on another call, we had, give two adjectives to describe how you're feeling. The reason I like that is because it makes you stop and reflect upon how you're feeling. And then you get to share it and hopefully connect in some way. So there's a purpose to that. It's not just because we're coming up with this arbitrary exercise, but it's an exercise that somehow gets you to stop, think about where you are, and then share it. So any exercise that meets those requirements would be great. I'd like to see a call start like that. Then it could go into the topics like you just said, and maybe you put two on the table and decide which way we want to go.
So that's how Saturdays have been going.
Say it
You know,
again.
that's how Saturdays have been going recently. We've actually just started with a few ideas. I usually come with a few prompts from the previous week, such as a Facebook post that I thought was noteworthy. And then people sort of say, okay, this is what I'm interested in talking about, because I have been asking what are topics that people would like to talk about. So being open is a way of soliciting what people want. I think I've not really ever yet, okay, been restrictive as far as what we've wanted to talk about. So if that format is still comfortable, I'm thinking, isn't that what we do on Saturdays?
Yeah, I love Saturdays. I do love Saturdays.
Right.
I'm thinking I want something to extend a little further and a little different. I used to love unblockings. I haven't really in the past, in the recent past. I don't miss it, but I loved the way it started. But it was, I think it's important to, again, like, maybe Colin would call it church sometimes. There's something about reflecting on our spiritual nature that I think is important. And sometimes it comes up, it comes up in bits and pieces. Anyway, I'm done. I was just sharing something before the meeting started, and that's how we finished. We can start fresh now.
I don't want to dismiss it. I do want to think that part of the reason for proposing a new format on Sundays, given that the time opened up, was to build upon some of the emerging ideas that had come out of Saturdays. Things like focus, things like agreements, things like memory, things like co-visioning. And so those are the four, at least of the few items that I thought would drive a new style of conversation. And there's nothing there that says, let's take feelings out of the picture. I would like to take triggers out of the picture, but I didn't ever say anything about taking feelings out of the picture. So if we want to talk about how we feel with certain behaviors, I think that's entirely appropriate.
Yeah. And I don't even know, like, I'm also thinking in terms of larger group. I don't know if I shared it on the call or with Barry in text, but I feel like we're not looking at enough patterns. We look at the patterns from the past, or we look at what we hope will be patterns of the future, but we're not really looking at ourselves within our present patterns. It's like we don't realize we're part of that system. And that's a big problem. And I don't mean as individuals, I mean as.
It won't surprise you that I've written a one-page article on pattern thinking, and pattern thinking is a subset of systems thinking.
And that's why, like, whenever you say, like, this is graduate level stuff, I want to say, no, it's really not. Maybe the way you're expressing it is, but we need to express it in a way that's accessible. Because
Yes.
honestly, I've thought like this since I was 5. I don't remember how I thought before I was 5, but I remember how I thought when I was 5.
Yep.
And again, it's like, and you've said this, we need to be able to translate for different groups of people, but the concepts can be picked up by many people who will never get to graduate level.
Most people won't.
But it's not because they're not capable. It's because they haven't been, there are many people who just haven't been exposed or don't have the life circumstances that can allow them to spend that much time exploring.
Right. That's one of the reasons we have such a huge industry in storycraft, plays and dramas and movies, because every drama that's been made into a entertainment there's a pattern of interactions, a pattern of relationships that you focus on for 90 minutes worth of a story. And so you have thousands and thousands of case studies of patterns of relationships.
And Alex has his hand up,
Yeah.
but I just wanted to say one thing, one line. I want to be able to look at those stories and learn from them. And we don't do that. And Alex, go ahead.
Well, we're a small group. There's less than a dozen people. Can you hear me?
Yes.
With a tiny group as we've got here, somebody can come along with an issue, and 5 people will come up blank, and one person might have something to offer. The larger the group, the more the chance somebody will come up with a more closer solution to what that person is looking for, whether to unblock whatever it was, whatever the issue was. In a small group like this, it's an uphill battle to get anything done.
So let me say this. I think all of you did hear, and I'll repeat again, that this is an attempt to find a bit more focus, a bit more around agreements, a bit more around shared memory, a bit more around co-visioning. And I see that those suggestions that you have, Stacey, are all consistent with that. The fun versus seriousness, that's how we conduct ourselves. Those are the behavior kind of things that we had talked about. Monologue versus dialogue versus guest one-on-ones versus, having bands, etc. That's a suggestion around how we conduct this, which I think affects focus. Pattern thinking, I think that is part of another aspect, which I didn't today itemize, which is truth, critical thinking, systems thinking, which I think Barry has mentioned. Learning from others, learning from stories, that's part of the shared group memory idea. So we can verbalize differently, but I think the key ideas are still there. So I'm puzzled a little bit about your apparent frustration with what's going on here, because I'm curious whether or not you saw that where I was trying to go is actually very aligned with where you would like to go.
So the frustration is, I'm glad that there's all these works out there that I could learn about what everybody thought about something. Now I need to find out what Sam thinks, what Josh thinks, what Barry thinks, because we're all part of this. And I need more of that. So I would ask you, okay, so you gave us the list of all these things. Why? To what purpose? For Sam. For what purpose is this serving? For you, not for anybody else, just for you.
Okay, maybe I'm assuming that was clear. The reason it is important to me is because if we're starting teams, I still firmly believe that having those 9 artifacts that are identified greatly accelerate and gel teams. So
stop
memory.
1 second, because this is where
Can I
I'm.
answer your question though, Stacey?
But what do you mean if we're starting teams? I don't even know where they're coming from. What do you mean if we're starting teams?
If we're trying to collaborate, let me put it that way.
Are we?
I am. Yes. I'm trying to find others who are aligned, where we can actually cohere our energies, amplify each other, support each other's works, revise and refine and learn from each other, understand what each other means by good or by productive or by sustainable or by thrivable, and see whether or not those can actually then reach some kind of critical mass. And I've said that from day 0. And I said that in multiple ways. And everything I've suggested, which is co-visioning or coexistence or 9 artifacts or COI or mentor or, global mind, et cetera, those are all consistent in the long arc of this discussion. Now, it's not surprising that few others have it because we've not figured out how to write this down so that it's memorable and retrievable easily. And so that's why the shared group memory idea is key. But yes, this is part of the long arc for me.
So my question to follow up that is, when you find your team, what are you going to do then? Because that's what I'm not clear on.
I'm going to support them. Hopefully they will support me as a first step. A second or future step is hopefully we can then collaborate with each other, but that's not my first assumption, because that collaboration assumption is what gets most teams misaligned, because they don't agree on charters, they don't agree on resources, they don't agree on credit, they don't agree on assets, they don't agree on timeframes, they don't agree on commitment. And those are all agreements that I think are dangerous if just assumed. And that's why agreements are key to me. I want to understand the underlying dynamics of agreements. I want to understand the underlying dynamics of co-visioning. I want to understand the underlying dynamics of behaviors. I want to understand the dynamics of using shared group memory. Those are all various aspects of why I think we're looking, or I am at least looking at why collaboration sometimes does not happen and often falls apart.
I've got a rough idea of all of those things you mentioned in the generic form, because I belong to other groups and they all have those things covered in their charters, respective charter, whatever. The thing I'm missing is the agenda, the manifesto. This is where I think we need to focus for a little while until we can write something up about this vision statement, and really attracting people with something, marketing gimmick, a short, quick line about that focuses, 2 sentences that says what we're about. And that, to me, that's missing so far. Over.
Thanks, Alex. I appreciate that. And thank you, Stacey, for bringing up these issues. See, this to me says there's a tension. Alex says, we've got a lot of models. Here's what works. Why don't we just do that? Okay. I'm on the other end saying, can we co-emerge that? Can we build that together? I know that there are hundreds, thousands, millions of examples out there, and I could have imposed one. And in fact, I've been very careful since 2017 to not necessarily impose them. I do suggest a few, but I've never imposed anything. I've never mandated anything. This on Sundays was an attempt to do a little micro leadership step beyond just, hey, let's hope that something emerges from the group. It was an attempt to try and say, let me take a small step and see if people find that reasonable. Now, Alex, you're saying other people have hundreds of millions of reasonable steps. Why don't we just take those? Because I want to look at the assumptions underlying each of them. I want to look at whether or not they require that there's a big leader, one that's been appointed, one that has power, one that has, all these other attributes. Because I'm not assuming that when autonomous people come together and decide to figure out whether they can align. I think we're still in that stage of, can we figure out whether we can align? And so triggers, for example, is one thing that's really kept me and a few others from aligning very clearly. Agreements is another. Shared group memory is another. Those are all things that people have disagreements about. So I'm giving you my suggestions for how we handle that. And it's curious that even before I lay out these suggestions, you appear to have some frustrations with even the possibility of them, Stacey. And that's why I'm curious how you feel that way without these suggestions actually having been expressed yet.
Okay, so you're using the word frustration. I'm just stating a need that I've identified for myself that isn't here.
But you assumed that the need would not be met here.
Well, I assumed, no, I'm tired of waiting for it. It's not that I've been here for a few years. So I guess what I'm saying is, so I hear what you're looking for, and I also agree with what Alex is saying, that those both two things have to be present. I already have a very good internal sense of how I would work in a collaboration and the types of people that would fit. I get that intuitively. I feel like I know that. So
Can you write that down? Can you express it? Are you willing to go on record saying, this is how I want to conduct?
No. Oh, am I willing? Wait a minute, I'm willing to go on record for you because you're asking for that. That's my serving your needs. What I'm saying is for me, in my personal life, in my way of doing things, that's an internal system that I don't have to take the time to write. I have those patterns in my head. I know what works. So what I'm saying is now I'm missing, what I think is missing is what Alex is talking about. What's the agenda? Because there could be a similar goal for two people. And the goal where they want to get to is the same, but I can tell that their collaborative styles are not going to work, at least not for me. So it's not enough to know whose personality I can collaborate with. I need to know that as well as where they're trying to go, because there needs to, for me, there will need to be some overlap in those things.
Okay, all right, Stacey, can I propose the following?
Sure.
I propose that I free up Sunday mornings. I propose that you take up a forum that actually, proceeds along the directions that you have just laid out, and I will support you.
And I really appreciate that. And as I said to Barrett, I've been thinking about it. I'm not sure that so I have been talking with somebody else in another space about doing something together where they start with a meditation. If people want to come to it, they can come to it. And then the next part is something that I will lead. I mean, I'm willing to do 15 minutes. I don't want to do a whole thing. I don't have a need to do a whole thing. Would I like to start a call with one question? Sort of kind of like the conversation we had toward the end of yesterday? Yes, that I would love. But after that, I want to see what emerges. I'm not looking to direct anything. I might, again, we started this call very briefly about, I said something about fun versus seriousness and what I recognized within myself. That was sharing. I would love to hear other people if they have thoughts on that. But then I want to move on to the next thing. I would like somebody else to be responsible for that part of it. I'd like to accomplish a few things for a lot of people, not just for what I want.
Barry, thoughts?
Yeah. As many of you know, I've long thought about and practiced a lot of these issues over 7 decades. And my practice, as you know, is to write stuff up whenever I have experience or insights, or I stumble across somebody else's fabulous insights and I summarize it. So I'll just give you a quick example. Looking at all those thousands of stories, there was a professor at Stanford. He was a professor of humanities. He died a few years ago. His name was Girard, and he spent 40 years studying those stories, all the stories of the literature, history and scriptures and novels and the whole 9 yards for 40 years. And dramas typically have conflict in them. That's sort of what makes drama kind of work, is that there's a protagonist and antagonist and they have some kind of conflict. What Girard did knocked my socks off. He extracted a very concise system model of conflict-ridden drama, using as his database this huge collection of human literature. And his model fits on a half a sheet of paper, and I wrote it up on half a sheet of paper. It's a 5-step model. And it knocked my socks off because I didn't have that model. When I ran into a kind of a dramatic thing, I go, how the hell did I get into this pissing contest? How the hell do I get out of it? It was very frustrating and perplexing. And Girard's model was a big eye-opener for me. And I wrote it up, I think about 23 years ago. What I have to offer is, like 4 decades of research, either my own research or my summary of other people's research on a lot of these topics. That's really what I have to offer. And I'm prepared to present this stuff at a time and place when people are ready to sit through any of it that they're interested in. And like Stacey says, I'm waiting patiently. I also wait patiently for an opportunity to present some of this academic material to an audience that's ready, willing, and able to attend to it. But I'm not going to present it, when people aren't ready or not interested or not in attendance.
I find it curious. Sorry, Alex, I'm going to say just one line, that we all find a way to say, I've been waiting patiently.
Yeah.
We all feel
Yep.
that. Alex?
We're in a forum where we see things sprout. We witness the germination of ideas that come from other people. Very rarely does one of our own ideas germinate. So we're spectators as well. We're commentators. We're agitators. There's lots of taters here. But the point I'm getting at is that the process we're going through is one of exploration and experimentation. Yes. So the sprouting is what I'm watching for and hoping that other people will agree that some of these ideas are good, worth pursuing, worth focusing on with other friends in groups outside of the GCC, perhaps in your own neighborhood or in your own town or city or state or country. It's a big world. And that is my hope. I often think about the lack of the vision statement, the GCC, but there is something there. I forget exactly what it is. It's the old remnant that came from the original global challenge, which is defunct. I'm waiting for another billionaire to put up $1 million for another venture. And so I think some of them are doing that. I haven't looked at it closely. I believe there still is an ongoing annual prize for ecologically sustainable developments and ideas, inventions and awards and stories. So hopefully I'll apply to when I publish my book, I'll submit that as an application for a prize and see if it goes anywhere over.
Let me do a thought experiment with you, Stacey, if I could.
Sure. I like
Right.
experiments and I like thinking.
If I had thought of 3 or 4 focus ideas and sent them around prior to this meeting, how would that have made you feel?
I didn't come expecting to feel assertive. I would have been fine. And I am fine, or I wouldn't be here.
But you sound frustrated. You sound unsatisfied. And you look unsatisfied.
Well, I'm a little, okay. Yesterday brought some ideas to the surface. So for me, for example, I think one of the things that needs to be solved for is I do believe that we're creative by nature. And I do believe that if people had a creative outlet individually, whatever it is they may need, they'd be happier. I believe that happier people would provide a happier planet. So I have all these underlying thoughts. I believe we're naturally curious. So I say, well, if people are naturally curious, and if there's a need to be creative, doesn't it make sense that we find ways to help them use their curiosity and their creativity and to collaborate to make things better? It's very simple. I could have said this, I could be 5 years old and saying this, and I don't see it happening. I think we're asking the wrong questions, and I'm not so much looking to what can I do out there. And Alex, I really appreciate, you're wanting to make the world a better place. But for me, it starts with right here in this room. Like, what can we do that's an exercise in collaboration? Or what can we, so for me personally, I love when you ask me questions. I get a chance to share with you what I've been carrying that I don't have the patience to write. Like Barry's written all these things. That just hurts my brain. I've done that in the past. I've done that in school. I've done it when I've really been desperate and down and out. But like last night, so I'm house sitting. I'm totally by myself. And I really got on a roll where I had all this like creativity. And I wound up talking to my sister. I had nobody to share it with. I'm the kind of writer that likes to write in a team. I don't want to laugh by myself, and I'm pretty funny. I want to be with a group of people where we're like, and adding to this, like I see myself sitting around a table writing a comedy script. I don't want to do that by myself. And yet you see all these women, especially, it's always a one-woman show. And that's because it's so hard to get somebody to collaborate. And that's what I'm looking for. Go ahead, Sam.
Several comments. Didn't Amy Poehler and the one with the glass, Tina Fey, collaborate very well?
Yeah.
Absolutely. And that's why I said, I was telling
Okay.
Barry, I
That
have
was just an
found-
example. That was just an example. Let me respond to you. The questions that I was asking at the end of yesterday's session, situation 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Did you not get the sense that that was oriented towards this exact point that you were making?
Yes, in the way that you wanted to present it, not in the way I would present it. So I'm happy to do it your way, but I have a different way.
And I'm asking you, do you want to do it?
Well, then first I'd want to go back. That's why I wanted the transcript, which I didn't get to look at, because I think I would like to go back to the basic questions. Like I remember there was one point where you didn't think we were discussing whether or not people have a need to create. We didn't necessarily agree on what we thought about
No. Don't think that that was me thinking that. That was me asking questions, Stacey.
So and
Is
that's
that
my
what triggered you?
But I'd like us to further answer those questions.
Right. So that is completely appropriate, right? But does it need to be, let's say, countering my proposal for how we structure this particular session? I hear that that's top of mind for you and that you really want to go there. And I also want to go there. And yet the proposal for how we do this today is still in discussion because this is so top of mind for you that you really want to continue that thread.
No, Sam, I actually said that I was talking to Barry while you were fixing your camera, and let's start fresh and let you have your session. So don't make this like I've decided to make this a conversation. You made this a conversation. I was done. I'm here for you.
Stacey and I actually have collaborated. Stacey wrote up a Medium piece that was her interpretation of one of my academic articles, and Stacey and I played around with a project that Stacey came up with. I don't know, it was almost 2 years ago now, I guess. And I ended up writing a bunch of song parodies as part of the concept that Stacey had. So we've done it. I wouldn't say that it got very far. One article and a few song parodies, but still it was fun.
But I'm ready to revisit it, and I have new players.
Okay, my other comment, Stacey, was around your notion of fun and humor. So when Alex was speaking, I rudely, when he was saying a lot of taters, I said, "is potato." Now, many of you probably don't get that reference. Those of you who watch Colbert would get that reference. And that, to me, was why I was wary of humor yesterday and expressed it. Because humor can be quite appropriate. If brief, it doesn't need to derail. So I didn't actually derail. But nobody got that reference, or at least nobody showed that they got that reference. And then I was just kind of either number one, feeling like a fool for attempting something, or number two, I was feeling like, that kind of makes my point that I was making yesterday. The humor is a little bit, you have to be careful with humor.
It's an art and a science.
Yeah. And it was an attempt to see if something would work. So I'm quite open to all of these ideas. I just think that it would help if we had some structure and focus and agreements and memory. Otherwise, just as you had some needs that were top of mind for you, Stacey, I had some. Barry might, Josh might, Alex might, Colin might, Jaswinder probably does, Joel does, et cetera, et cetera. How do we merge that so we actually have a way to move forward? And that to me seems like focus. So that's why I was asking the question, if I had written up 1 or 2, 3, whatever, focus suggestions, and still said, well, if you don't like any of these, let's figure out something else. But the more it's open, the more it feels like Saturday, and it feels less like there's focus on a direction that we've kind of agreed on. And that, I think, is what I'm trying to create with Sundays. Whether it's around feelings or around humor or around stories. Let me talk about stories. I once tried a different forum with different people that said, let's just go back to the thousands of hours of GCC videos. Let's pick out 1 minute or 5 minute or 15-minute segments, and let's really understand what went on. What got agreed? How come it got forgotten? How come it got then repeated 15 times in the next 5 years? How come somebody just sort of leaned back and didn't say anything after a few minutes? How come somebody just said, oh, well, I don't agree, but in a sense, they were just using different words, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. That was another way of looking at how do we actually learn how to collaborate better. That's one possible way of proceeding with this as well. After I heard the suggestion that, hey, let's go back to some of our stories and let's really learn from them. To me, that was an attempt to learn from a lot of the GCC stories that have been happening. So all of those are on the table. I just feel that there's a way that you feel not connected to what I'm trying to do. And you didn't want to lead it, but we've gone 47 minutes already on this.
So again, I'll say one more time. This was a conversation I had started with Barry earlier. It was never about changing this session. It was about something that I felt within me that I needed to sprout. Has nothing to do with changing this.
And I invited you to
for
sprout that. I invited you to sprout that, Stacey. I do.
But I don't, this is not about your inviting me to do it. This has nothing to do with you. This is me. I have to decide when to do, what to do, with whom to do it.
So let me extend you another invitation, Stacey. How about you and I have a one-on-one, let's say next weekend, after we both have a chance to watch this video and see how we could learn from that. Is that okay?
Yeah, we don't even have, I'm happy to do it in a group. I know exactly how you can ask me anything and give me 10 seconds and I can tell you.
Okay, so let me ask you a question right now.
Sure.
When I was trying to propose some topics and put them on the table, and I had 1 or 2, but you proposed about 5 or 6. And then we tried to understand what that was, and that's turned into the last 49 minutes.
I didn't propose, but you keep saying I proposed.
No, you did propose, right? You talked about fun and seriousness. You talked about what is humanity. You talked about a format, which was the monologue plus the dialogue. You talked about pattern thinking. You talked about learning from stories. All of those were suggestions you put on the table.
No.
Yes.
All of those were things that I was talking to Barry about while you were fixing your camera.
But I was back. I was recapping those topics.
Because you chose to recap them, but I'm pretty sure.
Because I didn't want to dismiss you. I didn't want to disregard you. I didn't want to disrespect you.
But I was fine because I wasn't trying to make.
But you weren't fine because I kept asking about nuances and you kept clarifying and you kept contradicting and you kept wanting to say.
I thought you were interested in knowing, so I was sharing.
This is why these are potential topics for discussion today.
Barry?
Sam's getting a little heated and that's uncommon for Sam, so I just want to.
I'm trying to respond to Stacey, but I find that almost everything I try is not connecting with Stacey. So I don't know what's going on here with me. I have to study this a bit more.
Yeah, I think we need, there's a time for pondering and not escalating the.
Well, I wasn't going to escalate except Stacey said, ask the question now. So I was asking the question now.
Well, because I don't mind answering a question, but it's not meant to be confrontational. I'm just sharing with you how I feel. It's not against you. It's not in opposition to you in any way.
I don't feel it personally. I'm trying to figure out why, because these attempts are trying to support you, you don't feel that way. You don't feel like I'm trying to support you. Like I invited you to take this time on Sundays, or I invited you to put these topics on a table and we'll consider them. So all of those suggestions get a response from you, which is, no, I didn't want that.
To be honest, I don't want that here. I don't have all the pieces I need to be supported in this particular environment, if I'm being totally honest. I don't want to do it here.
Premature, maybe. It's not yet ready. Need a little bit more head scratching maybe first.
Well, it's not even that. Yeah, we'll leave it at that.
So are you open to that discussion next weekend, either one-on-one or open?
I'm open to any discussion that you want to have in any of your calls that you're leading, or I wouldn't be here.
Okay, so I was earlier this session proposing a particular format, but after I suggested that, you had a lot more to say about how we conduct this session today.
I had a need to express what I've been feeling for a long time.
And I was trying to
Not a
support that. Do you recognize I was trying to support that? Maybe clumsily, but I was trying to support that.
Was frustration the right word or not? Or was that the wrong name of the
That was
emotional
the
state?
wrong word. It was more of a yes and, like
What?
this is, yeah.
What's the right word?
It's like saying, oh, and when I go to the supermarket, I have to buy ketchup. I was just stating something else that was missing that I need to go out and find a space for.
Okay, can I try another experiment? And this may be triggering, so I want to preface this.
To
Okay?
who? To you or to me?
Both.
I don't think I'm getting triggered.
Okay, so the way I feel right now, potentially, and I say potentially, might be how you felt when you said, hey, let's do a newsletter. And then Colin came in with a lot of suggestions. And you felt like, oh, geez, this is Colin telling you what to do. And so you actually then felt less motivated to do that newsletter because Colin had a bunch of suggestions. Now, I think he was trying to do a yes and, but you didn't take it that way. So maybe I'm feeling a little bit how you felt in that particular scenario. I'm just suggesting a way to look at this.
But it's kind of a hard comparison because what you have to understand is that I never really wanted to do a newsletter. What happened is I saw people talking about a newsletter, it never getting done. And I saw it as an opportunity to try. So what I'm interested in is how to get people engaged. That's what I'm looking for. What are the patterns that allow for engagement? So I saw that as a possible opportunity for me to set up something and to see if what I believed was right. That was my hypothesis.
Sure, absolutely. I recognize that.
So when Colin was adding to things before I was ready, that would have ruined my experiment. So that's what made me say, forget it. This is not what I want to do.
Do you see there's some aspects of that? Do you see there's some aspects of that here that I might feel the same way? I'm talking about my feelings now.
Okay, so yes, I do see that you have felt that way. And I apologize that you felt that way, but I think some of that's a little bit more your responsibility because all I was doing is sharing my needs. And if that triggered you, then you have to, keep saying it's up to the person.
Okay, could you actually then see that Colin was just trying to express his needs?
Yeah, but I'm not mad at Colin. I have no issue with Colin. I just backed out of it. I let him, I was like, okay, I'm out. Do however you
fine.
want.
So that's why I said, great, how about you take Sundays and you run with it and see what comes up and I will support you, right? I was doing the same thing.
Yeah, and I appreciate that. And I want to say this as nicely as possible. When we were doing the newsletter, Tammy was part of it. Harry was part of it. Glenn was always there. I already knew who I was going to lean on for certain things. Those elements are not here anymore. For me.
the window of opportunity open and closed.
Correct, correct. Now, if there's ever another window because it connects with something I'm doing elsewhere, I will certainly open that window. But I need things from other places. It's not all here for me.
Okay, so both you and I had been prepared to say we can only stay about an hour. It's been almost an hour. This has been a fascinating conversation. I'm definitely going to learn a lot from this. Okay, I will definitely rewatch this. I'll definitely still hold open the invitation to have a conversation with you about this. But at this point, I think I understand, your position, your feelings. Perhaps you get a sense of my position and my feelings. If not, we can still discuss it later. But I'm about ready to get on. Let's see, part of the reason is that I have 25 people coming over later today in about 2 hours. So I want to make sure that things are more or less ready or optimal for them. So that's why I was hoping that we could do a compressed Sunday session. So,
Or I can stay here and host a little longer if people want to.
yeah, you guys can stay. I'm not leaving because of any issue regarding this topic that we just talked about. I'm leaving because I got 25 people coming and I got to take care of the dogs, the dishes, the silverware, all that sort of thing, the tables. I did some of that yesterday, but still have to do some of that today. Will that be okay?
Yeah, I have to leave too, but Sam, I'm in the boondocks for the next 2 weeks. I have plenty of time on my hands. So anytime you want to have a one-on-one, just ping me.
Yeah, I just think it'd be better if both of us got a chance to watch this before we talk next. Okay. All right.
Bye.
Well,
Alex, you want to say something and then I'm getting off too.
I'm just thinking about a regular feature of the future newsletter, and that's a page about triggering this week's triggers. That's all.
Josh, you want to say anything before we go? Okay, Josh is not, no, Josh is not near his phone, so it's probably dealing with the baby. Barry, you want to close for us? Or stay open if you want?
Yeah, it's just, I think that, there have been passages in my career where I've done things either by myself that were very creative, stimulated by what's happening out there, but, doing the activity in solitude, and occasionally, not so often, collaborating with people. And I like to do things which are fun and educational and creative. A lot of creative stuff is done in solitude. It really is. You can share it once you've created it, and maybe people can enjoy it and sort of evolve it. But like for example, when you started that activity, and I ended up writing a bunch of song parodies, but those were done in solitude. Nobody co-wrote those with me. They were just basically riffs on what was in the air.
Right.
And that's pretty commonplace in my experience, is that when I write stuff on the internet, I'm doing the writing. There's nobody else co-writing it with me. And I'm not complaining about that. It's just a reality, just what it is.
And that's really something that I'm hoping to change, because I'm looking to solve a different problem. I'm looking more at things like loneliness and connection and building trust. And those are fun ways to do it. And, I shared with you that I finally had a recognition for me of why I wasn't saying certain things, because I somehow felt they didn't belong in a professional environment. And that's bullshit. And I have to that's where I'm reprogramming myself. So Alex, and then I have to go.
I was going to ask Barry if he saved the chat because I'd missed the first part.
Oh, thanks for reminding me. I didn't do that yet. Sometimes I do forget.
Then I can, because I've only got the first bit.
Yeah, actually, there's nothing on it since before you joined. At 11:31, you joined and said, "We have needs." That's actually the first thing on the chat. There's nothing before that. There was only like 5 lines.
All right. Well, have a very good rest of your Sunday. Talk to you later. Oops.
I'll give Joshua a chance to see if he wants to pop on and say anything. And if not, I will close the session. Okay, I'm going to end the session. End the meeting for all.